So we've discussed rocks, we've discussed soil, we've discussed fossil fuels and all kinds of different things with Earth's natural resources. But we haven't discussed a couple of really, really major factors, and that is air and water. And the Earth is primarily water, so it's a really important thing to discuss. And of course, air is everywhere. We wouldn't survive without either of these. So let's get started. Now, the Earth in general has 70% water, which means that basically almost the entire Earth is water, and then only about 30% is land. So that means that water is extremely important to civilization. Now, out of that 70%, only 97% astoundingly is saltwater, which is oceans basically. Now, that means that only 3% of our water on the earth is fresh water. So that's really, really important to know. And in fact, salt water is actually getting even more salty because of the minerals rushing into it from the land. So it's getting more and more potent with salt. Now, the fresh water is what we can use, but there's a problem with that as well. About 70% of fresh water is frozen in ice caps or glaciers. So there really isn't very much water that we can use. And that's probably good too because we don't want to waste and pollute the water that we have. So so basically people have become really aware of this and we're trying really hard to conserve our water and use it in a healthier way. Now water goes through a cycle. We drink it, we eventually pee it out. Eventually, that urine or different sweat, anything else, will evaporate. It'll filter through the clouds and through all of the cleansing processes, and naturally, it will rain down or snow down on us. So, interesting, interestingly enough, the water that we have right now is the same water that we have always had since the earth was created and since water was first found on our earth. And basically, the water that you are drinking and swimming in could have been swam in by the dinosaurs or could have been drank in by the dinosaurs. So, really interesting and kind of demonstrates why water is so important. Now, water can come in all kinds of different forms. We've all seen running water, which comes in the form of a river or a stream. Villages used to be built right by rivers, and they're still really important to today's civilization. Homes, farms, and businesses use running water. In addition, we have standing water, which would be lakes or reservoirs, which are kind of like dams. And they help collect the water and hold it in one place until it needs to be moved. The third form of water we have is groundwater. And this is basically how wells and different things like that are made. So basically, the earth, we have all of our sediment in our rock, and there are pores, which means if you think of like a sponge, there are little holes. And throughout all of those pores, the water that is rained down or watered in the plants or different things like that, it will sink through and filter through those pores. And eventually, it will get to a layer where it will no longer be absorbed. And the water will kind of pool up on top of that area. And that would be called an aquifer. And a lot of people get water from aquifers. Now let's look at these graphs a little bit. This graph in particular is really interesting. However, make sure you notice the date. It is very old. So this was over 30 years ago. Now, over 30 years ago, it's still pretty similar to today, but if you look at the continents that people live on, so obviously Antarctica would not be on here, but we have North and Central America, so basically us, Mexico, part of South America, like between Mexico and South America. We use more water per person than anywhere else in the world. And Europe, of course, is really close behind. Now, out of the US water that we use today, 70% of it is used for agriculture. So that's really, really important. We need to feed our animals, we need to feed our humans, we need to preserve our soil, we need our crops to help with everything. So this is really a good use of water. Now, 22% of it is used for industry. So, for example, if you're building, or if there's an industry that makes clothing, they would use water. And an industry that creates shoes, an industry that creates plastics, they all use water. And maybe they could find a different way to do it, or hopefully they have some kind of filtering process, but that would be something interesting to research. Now, 6% of the world's fresh water is used in households in the United States, and then 2% of that is used for drinking water. Now let's break down this 6% a little bit further. Out of that, 24% of our water, so almost a fourth of our water, is used when we flush the toilet. Now, half of our water is used when we take a shower or use a sink. Now that's pretty astounding. We should probably look at that and think, wow, what can I do to make a difference and change? In addition, using washers is another way. And then, of course, baths, other dishwasher, leaks, all that stuff. But these top four are really, really important to look at because these are things that we can narrow down. Now, we need to conserve our water. Obviously, it's important. We need water to survive, so we have to make sure we don't pollute it. And many places have created these types of plants that are basically water treatment centers. And they help filter out all of the bacteria, all of the gross stuff in the water, and it eventually cleans it through and you can use it again. So that's a really important thing to have in our world. Another way to conserve water is to use water efficiently in your home. I know it's only that 6%, but that 6% could make a huge difference if we save it and treasure it a little bit better. So maybe don't flush the toilet when it's yellow. If you've heard the saying, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. Whatever your family wants to do with that. Make sure your leaks are repaired if you see any leaks. Take quick showers. You don't need to be in the shower for 40 minutes. Convert to water energy saving faucets. Or, for example, you could buy a washing machine that helps conserve energy. There's fridges, all that stuff that helps keep the energy in the water to the minimal level. Don't run your water. If you're brushing your teeth, don't keep the sink running. I don't. I've changed this ever since I was a kid and I learned about water conservation. Water your plants in the coolest part of the day so that they can actually soak it up and the sun doesn't evaporate it quickly. Instead of washing your car, clean it in different ways. Clean your sidewalks in different ways. Find healthier water conserving ways to do different things. Now, we also are going to talk about air today. And air is extremely important because we obviously have to breathe in it. And air can easily be polluted. It's probably one of the easiest things that we can see the pollution in. And luckily in North Dakota, we don't see air pollution at all. We don't feel it, we don't breathe it in, except on days that in mid-August when there are big fires in Montana or Canada or different things like that. But we usually don't have a lot to worry. We don't have to worry about air pollution. But in places with big cities, they have smog days where they have to literally stay inside because the smog is too bad. And here's an example of the same city on a day with smog and a day without smog. Now, when you're thinking of smog, smog is basically an overabundance of carbon in the air, and that's not good. You don't want carbon, you want oxygen. You breathe out carbon, you breathe in oxygen. So it's very dangerous on your body. Now, let's talk about air a little bit. Air is made out of nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon. Now, plants make oxygen go out into the air, and they basically eat the carbon. So that's why everybody always says plant a tree, because trees will eat this carbon. They will eat this smog, and they will replace it with fresh oxygen. Nitrogen is also really important to plants. Now, if you notice in cities like this, they don't have plants, they don't have trees, and that's why this smog cannot be absorbed. that's my little side note. Stay in North Dakota where it's nice and healthy. In addition, though, we do have a lot more smog or air pollution in North Dakota in the winter because of the dense air and because of our heating systems. We always have furnaces running, which produce air pollution. Now, we've talked a little bit about the ozone layer. The ozone layer is basically like an invisible force field that protects our Earth from the sun. If we didn't have this, the sun would just fry us. We would have no choice. But there's a couple layers that help protect our Earth, and the ozone layer is basically that shield. Now, eventually, that ozone layer gets broken apart with all of the carbon in the air. And when that carbon breaks it apart, it can break through and that solar radiation can go through. And when that solar radiation goes through, that heats up the Earth tremendously. This is, again, kind of old. This graph is from 1984 and this one's from 1997. So again, 20 years old. But if you can tell, this one has a very, very strong ozone layer. The lines are strong and the colors mean that they have a high level of ozone. But look at in that 10-year difference how low the ozone layer is. And this is right here is North America. This is North Dakota right here. So it's just kind of an interesting thing to see. Now our graph might look way different 20 years later. Ways to prevent air pollution. Well, they always say to use a green car. There's a lot of controversy between that because if you're buying a green car, then you're wasting all of these cars that you have. And plus the batteries are produced with not economical resources. Now, if you do need a car, then just carpool. Ride with different people. They have carpooling lanes in big cities so that people can ride together a little bit more. And ride a bike, walk, do different things like that instead. Stop burning so much of this waste like plastics and stuff like that because that does produce air pollution. Use more clean energy. So we've talked a lot about that, using hydroelectric power, wind energy, solar energy, biomass, using wood, and different things like that. Now, those are just a couple ways to keep our air clean. In the long run, we all need to do our part and make a difference.